So good evening, all of you. And as you know, we all are here for the three sessions for the practical course of your PGTMS program. And the first session topic will be case history and mental status examination. Tomorrow, the topic session topic is mental disorders, and the last session topic is psychological interventions. And we have with us expert Ms. Pooja Sarma for taking these three sessions. Please mute,
Audible नहीं है.
all of you. All of you, please mute. Switch off your audio. Thank you. So as I was telling, we have with us expert Ms. Pooja Sarma for taking these three sessions of your PGDMS practical. And she is currently assistant professor in the School of Behavioral Sciences in Gujarat Forensic Sciences University in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. And earlier she had worked in IBAS, that is Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences in New Delhi. And she has vast experience of around 20 years almost, experience in the field of clinical psychology. She has PhD from the discipline of psychology here in New Delhi, and her area of research is geriatrics and mental health. And I'm sure all of you will gain from her vast experience in the field. So welcome, Pooja, and thank you for taking out time for these three sessions. And before we start with the session, one thing I would like to let me make it clear to all the learners present here that these online sessions are being facilitated for you, keeping in mind the COVID situation currently. So those of you who want to do the practical activities offline in the hospital setting, definitely you can do that. Okay, because you have your admission validity for 3 years. Okay, so within that admission validity, you can check your enrollment number when you have taken admission and what is the admission validity duration. So within that, you can definitely complete your practical plan and complete your practical activities in the hospital setting. Okay. But in case if it is not possible at all for you to do it in the offline mode, then you can complete this practical online practical activities and yeah. So then you can do this online practical activities and submit your report to the regional center. So we have on the IGNOU website, it is uploaded, the guidelines are uploaded for the online conduction of practical and the activities are given there. So you can follow those guidelines and accordingly carry out those activities and complete the report and submit to your regional center to appear for your June 2021 term and examination, right? Because the June 2021 term and examination has been delayed and now the university has declared that the term and examination start from August 3rd. Okay. So if you are going for completing the practical activities online, following the guidelines that are given, then you have to submit the report by July 25th to your regional center and appear for this June 2021 term and examination. Okay. That is going to be held in August. Okay, so August your theory exams will be there, and then after the theory exams, as you must be knowing, the practical exam, that is Viva, will be held. So that means that those of you who want to do the practical activities in the offline hospital-based setting, you can definitely do it. And in that case also, if you want to attend these online classes, you are welcome and you can attend these classes for the sake of your learning and knowledge. Okay, so that is there. Now, so as I said, today's session is on case history and mental status examination. And I think, Pooja, you can discuss about case history and then maybe we can take up a few questions after that. And then you can continue with the mental status examination. And then at the end, we will take further questions.
Okay, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
So okay, good evening, ma'am.
Start
good evening.
Now. Okay.
And good evening to all the learners. Today, as ma'am has already introduced, I will be taking the first class on case history. And case history, as we understand in mental health, is a very, very integral part of assessment or diagnosis. So, because when we talk about abnormal behavior, when we talk about psychological problem, we see that there is change in person's behavior over a period of time. And that is the reason why we need to understand the history, the problems, how they started, from where they started, what were the number of problems which were there. And that's the reason the detailed history is so very important, because this is a very, very significant tool in diagnosis of establishing any kind of diagnosis of psychiatric problem or any kind of psychological problem. Without knowing the detailed case history, you can be making lot of you're doing lot of wrongs in terms of making of the diagnosis. So that is why we need to understand this process very well. And I hope that my screen is visible to all of you. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Now, case history taking. So when your client comes to you, when a person comes to you, either he's brought by the family members or the person comes to you alone, the person will come with some kind of a problem and would want a help from the therapist or a clinician or counselor. So it is important to note down the basic details of the person. The essential details which are important are, for example, the name of the person, what is the age, whether it is a male or a female, what is the education qualification of the person, is the person working or is a homemaker or is unemployed right now, the status, the socioeconomic status of the person, then the marital status of the person, if the person is adult and is adult enough to get married, then the religion, the location of the person, the domicile of the person, the language that the person is familiar with, and the kind of family that the person belongs to, whether it is a nuclear family or it's a joint family, extended family. These are some of the basic details that we need to know about the person. Now, when we have taken these details, then during in this process of taking the details, we will not be asking, oh, tell me your name. Your name is so and so. Your age, so and so. You're okay. You're male. Your education. We're not taking it in that way. This is a process of building up of rapport, of knowing the whom you are interviewing. So your skills starts right from here, right from taking of the information. It has to be taken in a very relaxed manner, and it should not appear that it is being in a very, very formal way that you are taking the information. Because when you're breaking that ice gradually, only then the person will be opening up to you, or the family would be opening up to you. They would be realizing that here is a person who genuinely is actually is interested in knowing our problem and helping it out. It is not that this person is sitting there to really just be a part of some process and is doing things very mechanically. So it starts your rapport building. This starts right from here. So this has to be done in a very relaxed manner, in a manner that you are trying to interview a person and trying to know the details of the person. One line here and there, the reason, okay, if the person says that, no, I'm not working, so probably, okay, were you working before? Okay, what were you working as? So something like that can be always be initiated, and then you fill up these information. Whenever we take case history, we just pen down the important key points. We don't keep writing when we take the case history. Please remember that when we are taking the case history, it is basically a case history interview. So you are taking an interview, and if you start writing down in between as you take notes in the class, then it is no more an interview for you. Then it is probably you're just there to note down the important information. There is no eye contact. There is no rapport that will be building up there. So it will lose its essence, and it will also bring about a barrier between you and your client, where the client will probably not open up in giving information, because it is a very formal thing, mechanical thing that is taking place. So please remember, the case history has to, the interview has to take place in the structure format that I will be presenting to you, but the format should be remembered by you, and the details have to be filled later on. Important details, if you want to know, you can just write down in very, very brief notes. But it should not be a barrier or breaking up of your eye contact and your rapport with your client. Okay. Now moving on to the next thing. Now, when your client comes to this, these are the just examples that I have written for the learners to understand. So you will be taking down the chief complaints. Now, if your client is in a state where your client can talk about his or her problem, then always the precedence has to be given to the client, not to the family member or the person who has come. So suppose your client comes and he tells, you will be talking to your client, okay, what is the problem? What brought you here? What are the things that are disturbing you? Okay, now the client will he or she may just open up for one and two. Okay, is there anything else that has been bothering you for so long? Then the person may open up little more. So gradually you have to elicit till the time the client says that no, that's it. These have been the things that have been bothering me. And once you have noted down those things, you have to ask him, okay, since when these things have been disturbing you? How long it has been bothering you? How long these things have been there? So if the person may say that, "Well, I don't remember, but it has been there for quite some time." But still you have to ask, okay, tell me in terms of, has it been in months or it has been in years? So the person said probably in years. Okay, when did you first realize that there is some problem? So basically you're asking all these questions to understand the duration of the illness. This is very important, very, very important. Now, if your client says that it has been for 2 years, so if it's suppose a client comes in the month of July and it is 2021 and say it has been there for 2 years, then you will again bring back the client to the same, question that, okay, tell me what the things fine before July 2019? Were you fine, completely fine? Was there nothing which was, out of these complaints? There was nothing which was there. So if the client says, no, some things were there, okay, then you will ask, what were the things which were present at that time? So your client may say, probably, I used to feel very lonely. Okay, so then, okay, were there other things also? Then you have to write the duration of each complaint. So suppose out of 10 complaints that your client has said, 5 complaints have been there, you realize that they have been there more than 2 years. So probably they have been there from 3 years, 5 years, or 2.5 years. Then you have to write the oldest complaints on the top in terms of the chronological order, that the complaints which came first and were the oldest will come in the list also first. And then you will make an arrow and you will write down that this was the duration of the illness, but you have to be very sure about it. Okay. Then comes the one that followed, and then what followed. So it may so happen some complaints were from 2.5 years, some complaints from 2 years, but all these problems have increased from last 6 months, 3 months, 2 weeks, whatever the duration is, that they have increased from this time. Or they have been there from 2.5 years or 2 years, but there had been some more problems which have just come 2 months back. So they will come in the last of your list. And as I have shown in this slide, you have to write that these complaints were given by the client. So first the precedence has to be given to the problems which the client is reporting. Then it will come, then whatever the informant, whosoever the informant is. Suppose, for example, in this case, I have given that the informant was the father. So father has given certain problems like the person is not talking, he is not eating cooked food by the mother, There has been an increase in the irritability. He has not been taking interest in activities. So then you will write those things again. You will ask about the duration from the patient separately, from the informant separately, because you have to see whether the information that has been given have been too much discrepancy has been seen, or they have been collaborating, matlab, all this collaboration of information is being taken place, so it is fine. Now once you have taken the information from the informant also, uh, other thing that you have to remember, that in your chief complaints you are not writing technical words. You are writing all those verbatim as they have been given by the family members or the client. So अगर they say कि भूख नहीं लगती है, तो you can write भूख नहीं लगती है then and there. If they say कि बहुत चिड़चिड़ापन रहता है, ठीक है, just write that चिड़चिड़ापन रहता है. So verbatim is very very important. You should not be changing them into, अगर वो बोले मन उदास रहता है, तो in the chief complaints you will not write कि depression or depress. You will not write that. ठीक है? But when you are changing that, you can write low mood or sadness. That is very very important. You will not write the technical words in the chief complaints. Okay. Now, once we have written down the chief complaints, we have spoken to the client, we have written down whatever the client has felt, we have asked the informant if the informant is suppose father and mother or wife. So we have to ask others also. Okay, is there anything which has been left? Is there anything which has not been mentioned by them? Would you like to add something? So that is always a very good thing to do, so that if they are missing on something, then you can always add on by asking the other informants. And the other informant could also feel that they are important and they have come all the way to the hospital, and they have also been given some importance in terms of the treatment of the client. So they also will feel integrated to this process. Then comes the duration. You will write the duration of the illness. Now, the onset of the illness. So, now in this case, the onset was very gradual. It was happening very slowly from last 2 years. Very, very slowly things kept on happening. But sometimes the onset can be very abrupt also, very sudden onset. It can be acute onset also. It just started just few weeks back. So we have to write whether the onset, how the nature of the onset of the illness, because the nature of the onset of the illness is very important in terms of certain psychiatric disorders, and also later on in the prognosis of the illness. So onset, either it is acute, either it is abrupt or insidious. Now, people do write subacute also, but it is okay if they have been symptoms who were not they were chronic, but they were not very intense. Then probably you can write a subacute onset also. Then is the course of the illness. Now we have to understand, when there is an illness, the illness can be continuous. That means it has been once it started, it has been there throughout. The person has come to you, say, July 21. So since 19 July, the illness has been continuous. So it has never reached a state where the client was completely all right. So it has been there continuously. Or it could be episodic. So there was a time in between these 2 years, for example, where the client had reached the pre-morbid state. Pre-morbid state means the state which was before the onset of the morbidity, before the onset of the illness. So suppose 2 years back the patient was completely fine. So that is the pre-morbid state. And if in between these 2 years the patient has ever reached a time where he became exactly how he was 2 years back, so that means he reached a pre-morbid level, and this illness, that episode that happened, was the illness that took place was an episodic in nature, and again after some time of reaching pre-morbid level, again there was a episode of the illness. Now the nature of the episode can be different, symptoms wise it can be different, but it will be an episodic illness if the person has reached his pre-morbid functioning level in this past duration of the illness. So then it will be an episodic course. Coming back again to this episodic, I would also like to clarify here. Suppose the person comes to us in July 21 and has been ill for, in this history that I've given, it is for 2 years. So before 2 years, the person was fine, but in this 2 years, there has been a continuous illness. So this was one episode, and if the person was ill retrospectively before 2 years and at one point of time and had reached a pre-morbid level, and then again became ill in say July 2019, then this will be considered as one episode and there will be a previous episode, but the HOPI, the history of the present illness, will start from this episode only, will not start from the previous episode. Okay. Further, when I will be talking about the treatment history, I think it will be further more clear there. So the course can be continuous, it can be episodic, it can be fluctuating. Now, fluctuating is that sometimes, though it has been continuous, but then there had been periods when the patient showed improvement, whether it is because of the medications or without medications, but there have been improvement, but patient never reached the pre-morbid level. So there can be those, the waves, but never reach the pre-morbid level, and we call it as a fluctuating course. Now, the progression of the illness, how the illness is progressing, it can be deteriorating. There has been a decline in the functioning level of the client for last 2 years. So it is increasing basically, symptomatically the patient is increasing, which we called as deteriorating progress, or it can be improving. There has been an improvement in the symptomatology, so the progress is improving, or it can be very unclear from the history whether the person was improving or it was not deteriorating. So sometimes the information is not so clear, or probably we are not able to, take that information so clear that it becomes difficult to say whether it was deteriorating or improving. So it is unclear. Now, coming to precipitating factors. So after we have taken the chief complaints, we have marked the duration, onset, course, progression. We now go for the precipitating factors. Now, what were the factors that led to this episode of illness we are talking about? So in this case, it could have been a lockdown that took place and the client lost his or his job. And because of the unemployment, the illness started. So the precipitating, something that triggered, precipitating factors are the triggering factors. What triggered this episode? What triggered this illness? So there can be certain factors. For example, suppose there's a girl who got married and came to her in-laws' place, and after some time started showing some kind of illness behavior, symptoms, then we would say that probably the marriage or staying in the in-laws' place, change of the environment was the precipitating factor, or there had been certain fights within the family that could have been a precipitating factor. Any significant factor that in our history we come to know that this has just preceded the illness when it started, and it has a psychologically stressful effect on your client. If that understanding you can develop, that okay, probably it was because of this, that's why this problem started, then that will become as a precipitating factor. But it is not your subjective understanding. It has to be very objectively done that. Yes, these were the precipitating factors based upon your information from your client and the informant. After this comes the predisposing factors. Now, there would be certain factors that would predispose a person for a particular kind of a problem. For example, somebody is having a very weak immune system. Now, whenever the person has go out to eat food, gets a bad stomach. Okay, so probably the predisposing factor every time would be because of the poor immunity. So similarly, there are certain predisposing factors in psychiatric illnesses also. So things that predispose a person towards, feeling more stressed and feeling more vulnerable to certain kinds of psychiatric problems. That becomes the predisposing factor. Now, in our client, the biological mother died in childhood, and the family environment was very disturbed, so did not have a very consistent kind of childhood. That problem was a predisposing factor that we will about that the history also, and then the maintaining factors. So, one are the triggering factors, factors that predisposed a person for certain kind of mental illnesses, and then are the maintaining factors. Now, what are the maintaining factors? They are basically the perpetuating factors, or factors that are there in the environment which are making the illness, prolong. They are maintaining the illness. So, if the person had an illness because of the home environment was not conducive, it was very stressful, or your client felt very stressful, then probably the continuation of a negative environment back at home would be a maintaining factor. Or the conflicts that there are in relationship, in interpersonal relationships. Suppose, as I gave an example of a female, suppose there had been conflict with the in-laws, and the husband is not found to be supportive, she is not able to share it with anybody, and the conflicts are continuing, the person is not able to cope up. Probably the home environment are the factors which are maintaining her illness. Similarly, the unemployment in this case was a factor that was maintaining the illness. So this I'm just giving you an example to understand the basic all these concepts well. That's why I've given this example. So in the case to case, it will be different. Now, coming back to the history of present illness. Now, when I say HOPI, just a second. When I say HOPI, now HOPI is, I hope the screen is visible. So the HOPI, history of present illness, as we call it.
You can make it presentation mode, full screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So HOPI. Now, how you have to write the HOPI? These are some points that I have given here, which for you to understand. Now, you have your chief complaints, you have the verbatim complaints that have been given by your client and the informant. So, your starting point of your history of present illness, when you're writing it in detail, it is from the time when the symptoms first began.
Sorry for interruption, ma'am. It's not visible.
It is not visible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, visible.
It's coming. The slides are visible. You can check at your end.
You can just log out and log in again. Probably this may help.
Here is visible. Okay.
Sure,
You
ma'am,
check.
sure.
You check your end, please.
Okay.
Ma'am, we can see only start on written on the slide.
No, you have to pin on the presentation. Okay. Learners, you have to see on the side bar and then pin the presentation, this thing, then the slides will come. Because slides are visible.
Thank you, ma'am. Now it's visible. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I continue now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
continue.
sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. So we have taken down the chief complaints. We have the list of complaints that our client and the informant have given. Then we have to now write the details. Now, when we are writing the details, we are writing it from the starting point when the illness started. Now, suppose in this case, the illness started 2 years back. So what happened 2 years back? So 2 years back, for example, since the precipitating factors were lockdown and unemployment. So the informant gave us the information that the person lost the job because of the lockdown, and then because of the lockdown they continued with safe or was not having any job, and was sitting at home, was not having good interpersonal relationship. Already it was there, no, the home environment was very negative, so was not having good relationship with the mother, was not talking to anybody, was started keeping alone, started keeping started eating less, and talking less to people, not talking to the friends, not there has been a reduce in the activity. So you will be start writing all those things as they were given in the history. So one by one, all the complaints that have been given, the detailed information about it will be taken one by one as the chronology in the same way that it occurred. So things that occurred 2 years back initially, so they'll be taking the precedence in your HOPI, followed by other problems. So it will be in a chronological order. Now, the description of the symptoms which have been reported in your chief complaints and other complaints would also come in an HOPI. See, suppose they mentioned there are 3, 4, 5 complaints, but when they are talking about it, often it has been seen that there would be so many other problems also, which were mentioned then, but when they're talking about it, they start telling कि ऐसे भी करता है, और कई बार अकेले बैठ के ऐसे करता है, फिर एक दिन तो इसने ये तोड़ दिया था. Now all those things, once the person had broken something like that, so all those details which are related to one's symptoms, which are describing the intensity, the duration, the severity of the problem, everything will come. So if because of some kind of a problem, the problems that have been mentioned, the person was not going out, stopped talking to people, stopped going to work, was having a work but stopped going to work, and used to do earlier, the person used to do some routine but even stopped those routine. All that information will come in your HOPI. Anything and everything which is related to one's problem will come in HOPI, because later on it will help you for formulating your diagnosis. Then the biological function, sleep, appetite, libido, all those things would also come in the, when you're writing about the HOPI, all these information will also come, but yes, they will come in the last of the, how is the appetite and sleep and all. That will come in the last of the HOPI. HOPI has to be very detailed. It can be 1 page, 2 page, or 3 page, depending upon the number of problems that the person is having. HOPI has to be very, very detailed HOPI. Now, in your HOPI, you have to be writing, suppose the person is having sadness in the mood. Now, in this episode, there was sadness that has been there, and things which were related to sadness, loneliness, hopelessness. You have been, because once you're familiar with the disorders, you will know that, okay, everything is in the same, basic umbrella term. So in your negative history, you have to rule out all the associated disturbances that possibly could be present with this disorder. So suppose they are only mentioning about sadness and all, then whether the person used to feel anxious, whether anytime the person had attacks where the person felt that he will not get any hope and he will die, and felt a lot of palpitation, such kind of information needs to be taken. And if it is not there, that will become your negative history. That is, you will be ruling out that there was these things were not at all present. That can only be done once because negative history is something which you will be talking about, you will be asking. Your client and the informant only spoke about the things which are present. You will be asking about other things which were not present. So to exclude, suppose repeated washing of hands, suicidal ideas or death wishes. Sometimes a person has low mood but does not have a sense of worthlessness or hopelessness. So in your history, if you never came across those things and you've had asked them very clearly and you are very you are convinced that these things were not there, then it will come in your negative history. If the person was never having any delusions, I'm sure you must be aware about delusions, any kind of false beliefs which are not shared by the community at large, then that will come in your negative history. So patient was never found to be, talking to oneself and sitting without and laughing and talking without anybody around. If those things were not there, then that will become part of a negative history. So it is basically to exclude for the purpose of diagnosis. So what we are doing is that we are going from general to specific. So by ruling out all the associated problems which are not there, we rule out them and we become more and more specific now. And we also have to rule out whether there was any head injury, there was any problem, person had seizures or any history of epilepsy, um, any history of headaches, bleeding, any other physical illness, any medication that the person has been taking, and substance abuse, different drugs that the person, if he's addicted to or not. So all this will come in the negative history. Now, if the person was taking substance, then it will not be a negative history. It would be part of your HOPI. Okay, because many of the psychiatric problems, they start because of the intake of the substances. Then it will be part of the HOPI. And if there is no history, then you have to rule it out in your negative history.
Excuse ma'am, if the patient is taking any other medication, that would come under the negative history, is it?
No. If there has been other some kind of a physical illness, so you are just excluding those kinds of things which can contribute to psychiatric illnesses.
Okay.
Only those.
Okay.
Now, just giving an example how we write negative history, how we exclude things, like for example, we exclude in case it is not there. So we write no history was suggestive of the following in this, or how I have written here. Okay, so here also we are not writing the OCD, we are not writing panic, we are not writing generalized anxiety disorder, we are not writing schizophrenia, we are not writing bipolar affective disorder. We do not rule out the diseases, we rule out the symptoms. So in our negative history, we write the symptoms that we are ruling out. So this is one of the example that I have mentioned here. Okay. So after we have taken down the negative history, we then move to the past history. Now, as I said, if it is an episodic illness, so this episode we have taken down in the HOPI, in the history of the present illness. What about the past episodes? Because past episodes are very, very important in terms of the diagnosis. So we have to take detailed information about the past medical illnesses separately, then the past psychiatric illnesses, because sometimes there can be some kind of problem, the physical problem, the person had a very high grade fever and it continued for a very long time. So we have just very brief information about it, and then the psychiatric illness started. Then we have to really review all those things that could contribute to the psychiatric illness. That is why medical illness is very, very important, because to know whether there is some kind of an organicity or it is purely functional in nature. Once we talk about the past medical illness, we have given all the details if they have been so. Past medical illness, we're talking about the major problems. We're not talking cough and cold and small little things that take place. anything which is significant, we would write here. Suppose, for example, the person had sometime it so happens that the person had a true Caesar. Okay, and after the true Caesar, the person started having that true Caesar was for very brief time. But after the true Caesar, the person started having kind of episodes of unconsciousness, which lasted for half an hour, and then for 1 hour, and then for 2 hours, and that was, disabling the person in functioning, day-to-day functioning. So then here, that episode of Caesar becomes very, very important in understanding about the illness behavior that came later, and the association between things. Then it will also bring about our understanding of what were the things which were contributing to it, maintaining the illness, because these are not Caesars. They are not Caesars. The things that were the behaviors that were there later on. But if they occurred, then we have taken the detailed history about it in the HOPI, but then what were the things which were probably maintaining it? We need to understand that. So then we come to the past psychiatric illnesses. After we have taken the medical illnesses, we talk about the past psychiatric illnesses. So if it has been an episodic nature of the illness, then we will talk about the previous episodes before the person reached the pre-morbid level. The episodes which had were before present, we will take down the details of all those episodes, the symptoms, the duration, the treatment that the person had received, how long the person received the treatment, what was the course of the illness, whether it was improving, it was deteriorating, whether the compliance with the treatment was poor, it was a good compliance, but the person took multiple treatment from multiple healers. So we have to take all those details in the past psychiatric illness. And then the treatment history, as I have just mentioned, all those medications which, if the information we can get from the prescription, the medicines that the person was taking in the previous episodes, and how was the effect of those medicines, if the person left the medicine, why the person left the medicine, was there any side effect of that particular medicine, because then the psychiatrist will not prescribe that medicine if the person had already been there on that particular medicine and did not show improvement, or there were some side effects. So that is why treatment history for psychiatric disorder is very, very important. Now, after taking this, I'm just giving you an example of how we take the history of past history. Now, this is a very handmade kind of diagram that we have made. We can see that there is a episode here from 2009. It was deteriorating, and then from 2015 onwards, there was an improvement. And around 2017, the person reached the baseline, which I say about the pre-morbid level. So person reached the baseline, and then we can see that from 2017 to 2019, the March, somewhere around March, the person reached the baseline, and then the problem started again. So then this is the episode that we are talking about, and then we are giving all the details about this episode in our HOPI. The episode that started from March 2019 is our HOPI, okay, history of present illness. This is the past illness, and this is the treatment, the medication that the person received. And we also have to know in our past history that what were the reason why the person left the job. At the same time, it is important to draw this timeline, because to understand the different life events that took place, because in the course of the illness, in the psychiatric illnesses, life events are very, very significant in precipitating an illness or improving also an illness. So if the person got married and had a very supportive wife, So probably the person and that started receiving and compliance was very good, and we see that there has been an improvement. So if we come to know, okay, the person got married somewhere here, and then the partner was very supportive, and there was very support from other family members, and the partner was very sensitive and would take the person to the hospital and would take care of the medication, and then we see a episode that this is improving. Similarly, then we have to see that what were the factors that led to again restarting of another episode. Okay, so all those stresses that has taken place between this period, we have to understand those things also. So making this timeline makes it very easy in terms of our conceptualization of the case, understanding of the case, and we also realize where there are taking in our HOPI, where have been or in our past psychiatric illness, where are the gaps, so that we can again ask specific questions and we take down the information in detail so that it helps us in coming up to our diagnosis. Now, then comes, once we have finished with the history of present illness and the psychiatric illness, past history, then we come to the family history now. The family history starts from the genogram. This is very, very important. So suppose our client is a male, and males are marked with a square since he's a patient, he's the index patient. So we have colored him. And father, mother who died very young. Father, we can see here married, but then got divorced. You can see the marking here, which shows that there has been a divorce. Father got remarried with a woman who was little older than the father. Then father's family, his father, because it has to be 3 generations. Okay, so his father, mother, he had 2 sisters, one elder sister, one younger sister. Then the mothers, the biological mother, not the other mothers are important here, the biological mother and her family, and the sister who got married and had a daughter. So if in this family tree or the genogram that we have made for 3 generations, if there are any family member, whether it is from the father's side or the mother's side, who also had some kind of an illness, psychiatric illness, then we would shade that particular person. That shows that there had been some kind of a problem there, and then we can mention what problem was there in the family history details. Okay, so this genogram of 3 generations is very important, because we know that psychiatric disorders have genetic loading. Now, after we have taken the family history, okay, I've missed this part. The family history. Now, what is consisting of all that information that we have to take in the family history? So we have to first make the description of the family members who are staying with the patient. Then, what is the relationship of the client with each family member? As I mentioned, whether there has a medical or psychiatric illness in the family members, that we have to mention who is the person who commands that power in the family. How the patient communicates, what is the pattern of communication of the patient with other members and other members with each other. So we have to understand that pattern also. Who are the people who patients see as he or she is more close to, or they are the support system whenever there's a problem? Who is the person with whom the patient shares his things? And whether the family initially was a joint and later became nuclear, what was the time of, or what was the age of the client when the family became nuclear from joint? Because this is also a very, very significant life event. It can have some kind of impact, psychological impact on our client when he was growing up. Now, in this particular case, we have seen that, just giving an example, that the biological mother died when the client was very young. So that was a time. Why it is important? Because that was a time when attachment bond is being established. So when the mother, biological mother, died and the father remarried, and that remarriage, then we have to know then when the remarriage occurred, what was the age of the client? How were the client's relationship with his biological, the second mother? How was the mother's, second mother's attitude towards the client? Then what was the reason for separation or divorce? Then when the client's father again remarried, third marriage, what was the age of the client? And we have to understand all those reasons why the father, whether it was because of the son or because of the daughter, or there were other reasons that the father married. How was the relationship of this mother with the client and his sister, their age at that time? So in this particular case, the client was not having good relationship with his mother. So even the father was very disturbed because the family was not cohesive, and there was in IPR issues within the family members. So this was creating a lot of negative environment at home. So family history is, that's why it's very, very important to know the details about it. Now, so now after this, we move on to the personal history. Now, in the personal history, we begin with the birth and early development of the client. Whether it was a normal birth, it was a cesarean birth, the members who were there, how was the developmental things, milestones that was achieved, were they achieved on time? Did the baby cry just after the birth? At what age the baby starts sitting? At what age the baby started walking? Talking. All these milestones are very, very important. It sometimes do happen that the informant who comes does not know much about it, because mostly in this case, as it was the father, mostly they are not aware about those things. But we can always ask that, okay, in comparison to other children of his or her age, have you ever felt that your child is weak in terms of attaining those milestones? So probably that gives a fair idea about whether there was a problem or there was not a problem. Any kind of complication that took place, prenatal or postnatal, that needs to be understood. We need to highlight all those information here. And then after this, then how was the childhood of the child? Behavior of the child, the relationship of the child with other members of the family. Was the child very scared kind of a child who would just get scared very easily, was very afraid, was very fearful, or was somebody who would just go to anybody, had was very social, was very likable, was very talkative? All those things which describe the initial behavior of your client during the childhood, to understand the temperament and the developmental things, the environment of the child, and how it was facilitating the development, or it was not facilitating but was very had a negative impact on the child. Those things we have to understand here, the behavior during the childhood. For example, here when the mother expired and the father remarried, the relationship with the second mother, how was it? So that would also come here only. Then physical illness, if the child had during the childhood, that information will come here. Then the scholastic history, what age the client started going to school, and how was the client in the studies? Were there any problems that were reported? So all those details will come here. And if the client went for higher education, was it he was interested in those subjects, or it was forced upon them? What was things which was he was interested in? So all those details will come in the scholastic history, the subjects of his choice and all that. Then if it is a female client, we will be talking about the menstrual history. And if it was not a female client, then with both female and the male, and if they're adult, Then we talk about the sexual history, then how they came to know about it, at what age they came to know about it, then whether the client had any kind of sexual experience, and with whom the client had any, because sometimes it is with the in many of the families with the cousins, it takes place. So we need to understand that history is very, very important over here, and the initial experience and the client's emotions about it. This is something which is very sensitive, so that's why you have to take it not in a very mechanical manner. It has to be taken in a very sensitive manner with your client. Then if the client had worked, then how, at what age the client started working, how did he get his first job, how did he what was his relationship with his colleagues and authority figures, and if the client has left job repeatedly, then we need to understand about that also, what are the reasons and all that. Then if the client is married, then we will be talking about whom he got married to, what was the age of the client's wife or husband, their education qualification, was it an arranged marriage or a love marriage, if they have any child, then we'll be taking the details about it, relationship of the client with his or her wife, with the spouse, that we have to understand. So all that will come in the marital history. If there are any issues with the spouse family, that will also come in the marital history. Then substance history, if the client has been addicted before or even now to some substance, then we have to go into the substance history from when it started, initially what was the intake pattern, whether it increased or how it increased, with whom the clients take the substance, whether he takes alone or he takes with his friends, when does he take, what is the duration, frequency, and the amount of it. Then comes the pre-morbid personality. This is very important to understand, and it has some 8 aspects. So the first one is attitude to others in society, family, and in sexual relationship. Attitude of the person, of the client to others in the society, to the family, and the relationships. Then attitude towards oneself. What does he think about himself? Okay. Then the moral and religious attitudes and the standards. So these are the dimensions in which we have to understand and we have to take down the information. General mood of the client. This I am talking about the pre-morbid, before the onset of the illness, when the person was completely fine, what we have to understand that time. Then leisure activities and the interest of the client, that the client was interested in, what he would like to do when he had free time, his hobbies, fantasy life, his imaginations, all those things he would dream of, those things. Reaction pattern to stress. So whenever there would be stress, how the person would cope up, how the person will deal with the stressful situations. There would have been so many difficult times that would have come in the past, how the person has dealt with them. Then the habits of the clients. So the habits in terms of the person was a teetotaler, the person was a smoker, or was having some kind of, taking some other substance, all that will come in the habits only. The person used to do gambling, that will come in the habit only. A person has a habit of, going to yoga, going for walks, and all those things, maintaining very disciplined life, that will come in the under habits only. Now we come to the mental status examination. So it has following headings: general appearance and the behavior. So how was the behavior of the client? I've just given an example how we write the general appearance and behavior. So we have been observing, because we are taking the interview of the client for last say 1 hour or so. So we have been observing the client. So it is very easy to write the first one, the general appearance and the behavior of the client. Then comes the second one, which is level of consciousness. So he was alert, or he was very drowsy. Probably he was under the effect of some medicine, or was not interested only, and or was probably had been taking alcohol and had been brought in a state that he was not, the level of consciousness was very poor. So it can be anything that we have to comment upon it. attitude toward the examiner, whether the client was cooperative. He was very evasive. He was just not wanted to answer things, and he was just trying to evade every question, that was being asked to the client. Or he was very guarded. He was not speaking much. He was very suspicious. So that can be the attitude that he had towards the examiner. And how the rapport was established, whether it was established with ease or it was established with lots of difficulty, or it was not established only. It could not be established, can also be written out here. Then the psychomotor behavior of the client. So the client was fidgeting all the time. The client was fidgeting, or the client was sitting. He was just not moving only, or the it was very normal. He was only moving appropriate to whatever the content of the talk was. So there was nothing which was abnormal about his psychomotor behavior that we have to comment. Then the speech. So the speech was it relevant that the person was talking about? It was to the question that was asked. So it was very goal directed, or it was very circumstantial. The person was talking something, he would always start with something goal, and then he will come to answer it. But he will answer it, but he will give you tedious details while answering that. Or he would never answer the question, he would talk about something else only. Or he would begin to answer the question, but then he would just derail to something else. Okay, so that sample of the speech has to be given here. Okay, and then the inference has to be made by the examiner about the speech content. It was adequate, productivity, how was the productivity, how was the reaction time when the question was asked and the person answered. So how was the reaction time? There was break, the person has to be again coaxed to speak. So he was speaking, he was breaking, and it was stuttering, or those problems are there. Everything has to be about the speech, it has to be mentioned here. Then comes the cognitive functions. Now orientation. So first thing is whether the person was oriented to time, place, day, date, wherever the person is, that we have to comment upon. Then the attention and concentration. So the patient was asked to do, suppose, serial subtraction from 100 to 1. So 100 minus 7, then that minus 7. So similarly, till the time that the person was able to perform it, that will give the level of concentration that the person had. Or we can even ask, suppose, count backward from 20 to 1. We can give that depending upon the level of sophistication that we have dealing with. Suppose we have a person who has come from village. We may not ask the person who's a farmer that 100 minus 7 you please do. We may ask him something else to check his concentration. So we may ask him to give the names of the months of the year. All those Hindi months, if he's aware of, if he's not aware of January, February. And we can ask him to give it a backward. So, but for that, we also be aware of those months to check whether the concentration is there or not there. Or probably days of the weeks can also be given. It is basically to see that the person is able to sustain his attention for a given period of time. Then the memory. So in the memory, we ask immediate memory. We check the immediate memory. We check the recent memory and the remote memory. Now in immediate memory, we may go for a digit forward and digit backward. Okay, I hope you all are aware with the digit forward. We have in digit forward, we basically check a person's attention. So we would repeat digits, and we would give the instruction to the client that, okay, I will be repeating certain digits. You have to listen very carefully. And after I have finished, then you will be repeating those digits in the same order. So this will be the forward. So we we start from 2 digits, then we take 3 digits, then we take 4 digits. So that till 5 digits or 6 digits, depending upon till when the client is doing. Similarly, for digit backward, we have to present the digits, and the client has to reverse it and present it. So suppose you say 2, 3, and then you stop. So your client has to say 3, 2. So you have to first make your client understand what you want from the client, and then you conduct the test. So this is basically your immediate memory. But here I would like to say that many a times we do this test for attention and concentration. It is a very good test for checking a person's concentration. For checking an immediate memory, we may give a person, some words, and we may ask the person to, repeat those words after a few seconds. So that is an immediate memory task. But if a person has a good attention and concentration and has been able to repeat these numbers, that also defines that a person has a good immediate memory. Okay, so you may not have to check it again, because it definitely gives an understanding. But if you did it and then for 3 words a person was not able to answer, that means somewhere there was some reason behind it. Otherwise, if the person has performed adequately on backward and forward, then there is no reason why the person will not be able to recall the words that were given to him or her. Then we have to find the reason for that. Now, then comes the recent. So recent, we talk about in last 24 hours, what all the things that the person had done. Suppose what he ate for dinner when he came, what he last night he had for dinner, what was the breakfast the person had, how did the person came to the hospital. Okay, he came by bus. Okay, how long it took you to start from your to travel, at what time you started. All these are recent memory items, so we can ask about those things, and those things can be verified from the client's informant. Then comes the remote memory. Now, in the remote memory, we ask about the details about, say, when did you do your class 10, when you got married, events that had taken place in the past, which generally people remember. Okay, what was the percentage in your 10th? But maybe if the person is not able to answer one question, we will not have an impression that, okay, the remote memory was very poor. Then we may go for a few more questions to establish whether it is really poor or the patient is able to recall those items. So they would be adequate questions that you can ask that will give you an understanding from the history. Because when you were taking history, you were taking so many details. You may ask, okay, when your father got married 3rd time, that detail the patient may remember it very well. So similarly, we may ask number of questions from the remote memory and then give an impression whether it was intact or it was disturbed. Then comes the general intelligence. We ask about basics. We give simple calculations. We ask about simple questions of general awareness. It is not important to ask only what I have given, but your questions have to be based upon person's level of education. So if you ask questions, if a person is graduate and you ask a very, very simple question and you comment that his general knowledge was very good, then it will be very, very wrong, because it has to be appropriate to person's background, the questions. Then vocabulary, you can ask few words. It is better to ask in person's mother tongue, because many a times it may happen that the person is not aware of or not be able to describe those words which they are given in the other language. But if the person is fluent in the language, then only those questions or the words from that language should be given. Now, then we comment upon the general intelligence of the client. We also ask about the comprehension questions. So then we talk about the abstract intelligence. So we may ask about, okay.
Excuse me, ma'am, your connection is breaking, ma'am.
My voice is breaking. Okay, from where do you want me to continue?
No, I think it is.
No, ma'am, it is clear.
So you can continue.
Voice
Pooja.
is clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, ma'am, it's fine from your side, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so then in abstraction, we basically we may ask similarities between two things and differences between two different things, and we see that the kind of response, the richness of the response that the person is giving. So, for example, if the person says table and chair, and he says, okay, they are furniture, and they are used for sitting, and they are complementary to each other. Now, that is the richness of the response. But if the person says कि बैठते हैं, या the person says लकड़ी के बने होते हैं, चार पैर होते हैं, then probably it is very concrete level of abstraction response that the person is giving. Okay, but never judge from one response. We always have to give multiple questions to understand the level of abstraction. If suppose we asked a question which was of a higher abstraction, then probably, and the person was not able to answer, then we have to go for a little simpler one. And then we have to comment whether the abstract intelligence was at a functional level, concrete level, or at a conceptual level. Then we may ask the person about some question which basically are pertaining to the comprehension. I have missed out here. For example, one may ask a person that why do we do this? That is a comprehension question. For example, कि रेलगाड़ी में इंजन क्यों लगाते हैं? हम खाने को बॉईल करके क्यों खाते हैं? But we have to see that the questions have to be some standard questions, because it cannot be that anything that comes in my mind I will ask. They have to be standard questions, and they should be having some reference that so the questions that I am introducing to you, they are from Wechsler's scale of intelligence. So we have to ask certain questions, the abstract words that we have taken, the similarities, they have to be from some standard test. They cannot be very, because otherwise it will be different for everyone, and then that will be not a standardized test way to test a person's intelligence. So that we have to keep in mind. Then we comment upon the mood and the affect. So affect, we know it is that in that particular moment, how the person was in that interview, how the person was feeling. So we do ask कि मन कैसा है, आपको कैसा लग रहा है. So if the person says, whatever the person says, we have to just write verbatim. But then we also have to give our objective impression about the last couple of hours, or whatever the time that we have spent, how we felt the person. Was he very irritable? He was depressed? He was with thymic? He was very suspicious? He was very, very happy and cheerful. So how was the affect that we have to comment upon? Then we also have to comment upon whether it was appropriate, adequate during the interview, whether the patient, while he was expressing about different things, when we were talking about it, there was a range of emotions that we have experienced on his face, or it was very restricted. Okay, so we did not see much of when he was talking about things which may make a person feel very happy, but this person was having very restricted emotions at that time also. So we have to comment on the range, whether the range was restricted or it was full range. Reactivity. So when something was asked, depending upon the nature of the question, did we see that the person was reactive enough to that particular stimuli, or the reactivity was very, very poor? That we have to comment upon based upon the interview. Then appropriateness of the affect in terms of the speech sample. Suppose it was talking about that this mother or the previous mother died or whatever, talking about something which is very negative or something which will make a person feel sad. But this person was, on the contrary, was showing expressions which were not appropriate to the content what he was giving. So that is appropriateness. Then communicability. Was he able to communicate things appropriately, whatever, and was the affect also communicable? I was also able to feel when he was talking about things which were irritating. I was also able to feel that. I was also able to feel that when the person was smiling, I was also able to feel it. Because many times in people who are psychotic, who are not having a reality contact, they show some kind of affect, but
they are not communicable. You don't feel it the same way. Okay, and the congruency, whether the thought and the speech were congruent enough. So that is the affect was congruent with the thought and the speech that the person was talking about. That is the congruency. Then we talk about the thought, whether there was any problem in the thought, in the stream, in the way the person was talking about things, in the form of the thought. Suppose a person says that, I feel that somebody's inserting something in my mind. So the thoughts that I am having, they are basically inserted by others. So there is a problem in the possession of the thought, and the kind of thought that he's expressing, that we have to write down in the verbatim. We have to talk about. So in this particular case, the person used to feel that the mother probably adds something in the food. The third mother. That is why the person would not eat the food cooked by her, and every time if he eats, then he will have some problem. So he would think that the mother was mixing something. So it was more going towards the delusion, and we have to delusion about the false belief that there's something is being mixed, which is not being shared by the other members of the family, because everybody was eating the same food. So we have to write the verbatim also, so that your supervisor can understand that, okay, this was a sample and this was the inference, whether the inference was appropriate or not. So that is the reason why we write the verbatim of the thing. And we may forget it, because MSc is something which has to be taken, very, very frequently. If the person is coming to you or is being admitted, then if you write the verbatim, every time you realize that whether there is the person is showing some kind of improvement, or there is some kind of no improvement or deterioration. So that is the reason why we write the verbatim also. And from the therapist to therapist, or the clinician, the treating team, sometimes they may also change. So if it is written, the sample is written in the MSc sample is written in the file, it becomes easier for them. It becomes very objective data for them to infer and to further probe about it. So perceptions, whether the person is, hallucinations and all that we ask about. So we need to probe about whether the person is having some kind of abnormality in his perception, sees things which others are not able to see, or hear things which others are not able to hear, or, taste something which others are not able to, he has a different, or is feeling some sensations in the body which cannot be explained with any other phenomena. Then we write about that, and we give whether it was abnormal or not abnormality, the perception. Then the judgment. We come to the judgment, whether there are three types of judgment: test, social, and personal. Whether the judgments were found to be intact or they were not adequate. There was some problem in the judgments. For example, when we talk about the personal judgment of the client, it is basically client's understanding about him or her, and how the client view his or her life and the future course. So sometimes the person who is coming to the hospital, you may not be talking about treatment, who's having a problem will not be talking about the treatment, will be talking something which is so absurd at that particular point of time. So that is the reason we ask that, how do you think that you will get over your problem? So what are your future plans about your life? And also in the history, if certain things have been mentioned, like for example, something that is being given in the history, that in the current history, that the person did something which shows that his understanding about consequences pertaining to his life have not been correct, and he did something which was showing some kind of impairment in his judgment. For example, he was trying to harm himself, or was trying to commit suicide, or have been drinking alcohol, something. Now that if we have that piece of information and the person is being engaged in all that thing, so we cannot say that the personal judgment was intact, and that means that the judgment was impaired, because the person is not able to think about his future and consequences of his behavior towards his life. Then the social judgment. Social judgment would be like, if you were the first person to see that there is a fire coming out in the cinema hall and you were sitting there and you're the first person who observed it, what will you do? That is something which talks about a social judgment. Or if some guest come in your house, what will you do? Or if there was your neighbor's house, there is a wedding uh, which is being going to held. So what will you do? So some questions which you have to understand depending upon the from what set of background the person is coming, to understand whether the person has those social. Hello, can you please mute your mic? So those questions one needs to ask. Then the test judgment is basically we understand some kind of a testing situation we give to the client, whether in those. There is some disturbance which is there, ma'am.
Yeah, all the learners, please keep your the audio on mute.
So one of the questions that we ask in the test judgment is basically, suppose you see you are walking on the road and you find an envelope which has a stamp on it and it is a closed envelope.
Excuse me, ma'am. Shivendra Dubey, please mute your ma'am. Hello, Shivendra Dubey.
Yeah, Shivendra Dubey.
Please mute your.
So if we ask a question like that you find in a sealed envelope with a stamp and address on it on the road, what will you do? Okay, so the person, if the person answers, I will go to the post office or I will post it. So that is something which tests the person's judgment. Okay, then that means that the person's judgment is appropriate to the situation that is being given to the person. So then we comment upon the personal, social, and test judgment. Now moving on to the insight. Insight is basically what the person think about his or her problem. So we have grade 1 to grade 6. So in suppose the person says, I don't have any problem, then we say the insight is grade 1. If the person says that yes, something is there, but I don't know exactly what it is, so we say the grade 2. If the patient says that, yeah, I have this problem, it is because of the other people, then it is grade 3. If the person says it is because of me, then it is grade 4. If the person has an true intellectual insight about actually what it is, that is the reason why, then it is grade 5. And if the person says that it is because he has an emotional insight about the problem, he understands it is because of his emotions or his ways of behaving and coping, then it is a grade 6 true emotional insight about one's problem. Okay, so that is the insight that we comment upon the later on. This is very important because people who do not have any insight about their illness may not be able to do anything about it. So it is only when the insight develops, then the psychological management can be planned. Now, once we have done this entire exercise of HOPI and genogram, family history, personal history, mental status examination, then we come to the diagnostic formulation. Now, what is a diagnostic formulation? Basically, we are trying to formulate based upon the history and the MSc, we formulate the diagnosis of the person, things which have been present, all those positive findings which have been there comes in our diagnostic formulation, and it helps us to say that this is the diagnosis. And why this is the diagnosis? Because we have excluded in the negative history all other things, then it helps us in that exercise. So for example, I've just given you an example of how we write a diagnostic formulation. Okay, so we write these. This is the way to write a diagnostic formulation. We start with the client's socio-demographic details, then the chief complaints, then the precipitating factor, if any, and the predisposing factors, if there are maintaining factors, then the duration of the illness, since when it has increased, we write the episodes, the current episode we talk about, then how the progress had been, we talk about, then we talk about the MSc findings, all those positive findings only we mention. We do not give things which are normal. We only talk about things which were not right in the diagnostic formulation. Okay. And then after making a diagnostic formulation, then this helps us to arrive to a provisional diagnosis. Then we also write what can be the provisional diagnosis. We write the number of in the ICD, and then we write the points that were in favor of our diagnosis. Sometimes we also make differential diagnosis, but that happens when we do not have adequate information to rule out anything, any other diagnosis. So that is why we make a differential, so that this different currently by HOP in this interview I could not exclude other diagnosis, but in the future interviews I am going to exclude or see whether it may be something else also. That is the time when we make a differential. But if we are very, very clear with the history, then adequate information has been there, that it is only this, then we make a provisional diagnosis. Okay. So this is about just recapitulating all those points in the mental status examination. General behavior, psychomotor activity, speech, thought, mood, perception, cognitive function, attention, concentration, orientation, memory, general information, intelligence, abstract understanding, judgment, and that's it. Thank you. Any questions now?
Yeah, thank you, Pooja, for such an elaborate
Yes, ma'am. I have a question, ma'am.
Practice examination. So learners can ask whatever query they have. Will you take up? Yeah.
मैम हमें फॉलो अप भी तैयार करना है या केवल केस टेकिंग बस?
This is to you, ma'am, I think.
Come again, please.
केस टेकिंग के अलावा फॉलो अप भी लेना है क्या पेशेंट से या
आप अपना जो गाइडलाइंस दिया गया है उसमें आप देखो, उसको पढ़ो अच्छे से. उसमें फॉलो अप का मेंशन नहीं है, बट अगर आप हॉस्पिटल सेटिंग में कर रहे हो और आपके जो सुपरवाइजर वहाँ पे है उनके साथ आपके प्रैक्टिकल एक्टिविटीज मतलब रिपोर्ट में लिखने के लिए दैट इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड, बट डेफिनेटली आपके सुपरवाइजर के साथ फॉलो अप ले सकते हो. Okay, for your knowledge and understanding.
Okay, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I have a question. This is to Pooja, ma'am. Thank you so much. I have a doubt that initially you said that you should not start writing about the complaint right away, because then you are not giving so much attention to the patient. But how will we then remember all the details? Can you just throw light on this?
Okay. So as I mentioned, one thing which is very important is that our own concentration. Okay. So when you have a person coming to you who is in distress and is trying to talk about himself or herself, if you start writing down, then you're breaking eye contact and probably the person will not be fluent enough to give the details. So the writing part has to be minimal, and only those things which you feel that you may want to come back to this. There are some points, or you feel that this is something which I may forget. You just write it down there. But you know, the important part of case history is that you have to remember everything. And when I say remember, you can write the chief complaints. You can write those things which are very, very significant things that took place. But the entire thing, narration, if you start writing it down, then it will bring a lot of difficulties in your interview. good thing would be that you can basically stop a person at maybe after the entire history you have taken. The person, the client that comes to you will not give the history as per the structure that you are having. The client will start with somewhere with the family, may talk about something that happened in the childhood, but you have to remember so that you come back to those things again and again, and you keep writing those things. Here you have to be really very attentive to the client's problem. You have to remember it. You have to develop that skill of remembering it. And you don't have to write once the client has gone. You have to write when the client is there. So that little things that you have forgotten, you can again ask the client. But please sharpen your own memory for remembering things rather than, otherwise it will just break that rapport that you have with your client.
Thank you so much. I got your point.
Request all the learners to keep your audio off. Whenever one person is asking, then other persons please keep your audio off because there's a lot of disturbance coming in between.
मैम आई हैव अ डाउट. आपने ऑनसेट में एक्यूट, सडन और एब्रप्ट एंड इंसीडियस बताया था. मुझे एब्रप्ट का कोई एग्जांपल देके समझा दीजिए प्लीज.
एब्रप्ट इज सडन. मैं आज बिल्कुल ठीक थी, ऑफिस से आई स्लेप्ट, and tomorrow when I got up, my family observed that there were certain changes in my behavior. I was not looking the same. I was behaving in a very abnormal way. I refused for my breakfast. I did not go to take bath. So it just happened in a very abrupt way. It was very suddenly that some change was noticed. Okay, it was not a gradual way that the changes were noticed, but change were noticed very abruptly. You can say that there was a sea difference from yesterday and today. Then we say it is abrupt.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, can we give the questionnaire about during the interview session?
Questionnaire?
Yeah, ma'am.
Questionnaire of?
Like, ma'am, ma'am, I have actually.
Hello.
No, I have not understood your question.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, maybe she wants to know, is there any particular prescribed format for the taking case history?
Yes, the format in which I have presented is the structured format. This is also the enhanced format that I have shared, in which I have presented the case history. And since ma'am has already said, this will be uploaded.
For right, ma'am. Please, you tell.
So as ma'am has said, this will be uploaded also, so you can see the format headings from there and the details. Yeah.
The format is
completely applicable for.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The format presented here is you have you can check it when it is uploaded. The recording is made available, and also you can check the format which is given in your handbook. Okay, so that also has all these details, so you can check that format also, and accordingly you write it. Okay,
sure, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
मैम, आपने प्रेसिपिटेटिंग फैक्टर्स में जैसे लॉकडाउन का और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का एग्जांपल देके समझाया था कि दैट कैन बी अ प्रेसिपिटेटिंग फैक्टर इन अ सर्टेन केस. उसी केस में मैम प्रीडिस्पोजिंग फैक्टर्स में क्या आना चाहिए? मतलब मैं क्या पूछूंगी, मुझे समझ में ये प्रीडिस्पोजिंग फैक्टर है उसी पेशेंट का.
ओके, जब इलनेस शुरू होती है तब कुछ ऐसे फैक्टर्स इंफॉर्मेशन में आते हैं जिससे हम एट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं कि उनका बड़ा डायरेक्ट रिलेशन रहा है फॉर द इनिशिएशन ऑफ द सिम्टम्स. ओके, तो वो प्रेसिपिटेटिंग में हो जाते हैं. नाउ अगर मुझे उदासी हुई या मुझे इस तरह की तकलीफ हुई और मैं एक ऐसा पर्सन था जो बड़ा इंट्रोवर्ट सा था, मैं जनरली अपनी चीज़ें लोगों को नहीं बताता, आई वुड नॉट शेयर माई इनर फीलिंग्स फ्रॉम टू अदर्स, then probably those are the things which predispose a person, or probably I was a very dependent kind of a person who would not take any decision, who would depend upon other people for the decision, and some situation came in which the person had to deliver something. probably in the pressure of the office was such, the work environment was such. So probably that was a reason when we say that there was probably this could have been predisposing a person for having the problem, because these are the things which makes a person vulnerable. Okay, which were always existing in the person's environment or in internal or external.
Then what is the difference between the precipitating and the predisposing?
Come again?
Ma'am, then what is the difference between the precipitating factors and the predisposing now? Because both the factors are appearing just as the cause for the problem.
So if the factors have always been there, even before the triggering of the problem, they were always been there, then probably they were predisposing factors. But triggering factors would be those factors which can have a very direct relationship with the onset of the illness.
Ma'am, suppose in office something happened and then the problem appeared. But
that will be a triggering factor. So that will probably be a triggering factor. For example,
time you said that this is a predisposing factor.
No, see, what I'm trying to say is that if the person has been a kind of a person who was a very dependent kind of person who would not, take decisions, and in the office, the work demands that a person takes decision, the kind of work. So that has always been there like this, and the person has been feeling a lot of stress. But suddenly something happens one day that amounted to be so stressful for the person to really handle. He was not able to handle that. That particular event will be the triggering factor. But his nature of his personality has been exhibiting in terms of the information that we got, that will be the predisposing factor.
So what is innate to the person, that is his nature, is the predisposing factor, and whatever is external which aggravates the situation is the
it can be internal and external both. For example, in the current case also, as I have given, that the home environment was very negative, or the relationship problems were existing. Okay, so that had predisposed a person for multiple episodes or for this episode, but the triggering factor for this episode was different, something that triggered.
Pooja, I think it can be that the predisposing factors are the risk factors.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So
they're the vulnerability factors. Correct, ma'am. That makes a person vulnerable to certain problems, but sometimes it is a triggering factors that initiates that particular disease or disorder. I may be vulnerable for lots of problems, but I may not have shown those vulnerabilities or risk in last 2, 3, 4, 10 years. But something happened now that I started exhibiting some kind of symptoms.
Yeah.
Ma'am, how to deal with the patients who are not responding properly in giving case history and are violent? How to deal and how to take the case history of such patients?
So if the client is very violent, aggressive, then we do not indulge with taking the case history with that particular client. Then the informants are, we interview them and we take the history. But when the person becomes, over a period of time and on medication, the person becomes manageable and is cooperative, then we take the information from the patient as well.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can we take the MSc of such patients who are not cooperative, who are not ready to give the history? Can the mental status examination help us?
If the person is very violent and is very uncooperative, then we will write it down that it was MSc could not be taken, or because the person was very uncooperative and very violent. We will write it down there.
And we'll be taking the history only, that too from the informant.
From the informant, yes.
Ma'am, one more thing I want to ask. What are the perpetuating factors?
Now, for example, I gave an example that a person had a seizure once, and then after that, the person started having episodes of unconsciousness, and they continued from half an hour or 20 minutes in the beginning, then half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. Now, factors which are maintaining that particular problem. Okay, so there can be factors like whenever this person had started having these behaviors, these kind of symptoms, the family would become very, very supportive, and they would, excuse this person from the household chores, would be extra careful about this person, would be, taking care of the person. Now, they can be a maintaining factor for that particular problem, because it was not seizure, it was some other kind of a psychological problem. And then these kind of environmental factors started maintaining them.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ma'am, how about the case history taking for minors and smaller children?
So we have a different format for child cases. But generally these are the areas that we ask, but the format would be little different. Like we go for the family history and early development history, we begin with that.
And do we actually start with the child as the chief for the chief complaint? Do we start with the client, or do we start with the family for that?
If our client is old enough to talk about, to say that whatever the problem that the child is having, so we would see, it is always better to talk to your client first for the purpose of building up of rapport. Okay, because you will be later on also, you will be interviewing and taking down the mental status examination, you will be conducting certain tests. So if the client feels that I am not important, whatever information that my informant is giving, they are only important for the clinician. So that initial faith and the trust the client would be losing. So it is always important to make your client comfortable first, and then you ask the informant.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
How long does it take for a case study? How many sessions or how many hours is ideally required for case taking?
Sometimes it may require 2 to 3 sessions. Sometimes it may be more than 2 to 3 sessions. But
ma'am, excuse me, ma'am, it is always necessary to ask the people who have come along, the patient, or if the client is talking to us properly and has an insight, he's understanding what we are saying. Even then we have to talk to the relatives or those who have come along.
If you think that your client is, giving all the details himself and seems to be having a very good reality contact, then you will definitely take all the details from your client. But you would also ask the informant later. You may request your client to sit outside, and then you may interview the informant and take the informant version also.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
For maintaining objectivity.
Okay.
What is social history, ma'am? How to take social history?
Pardon? What?
How to take, ma'am, social history? Social history.
Social history.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
But I did not mention social history.
Like that, the social instruction of the patient, including behavior at work, in the school, like this.
That is the pre-morbid functioning personality we want to know. So how was the person? His functionality, social functioning that we want to know. His relationship with his friends, with his community, with his society. Okay, was he very active in his society? Was he somebody who would take initiation? If किसी के घर में कोई काम है, तो the person will initiate and he will help it out to people. So his social relationship, that is what we want to know. That is in the part of the pre-morbid personality. Or the person was very introvert, could not talk to anybody, was very reserved. Okay, so that is the social part that we want to know.
Okay,
thank you. Can you please explain the benefits of MSE for patient point of view?
Benefit of mental status examination.
जैसे जिस केस के लिए हम MSE कर रहे हैं, तो उसको immediately क्या बेनिफिट्स मिलेगा इससे?
उसको ये बेनिफिट
मिलेगा?
मैं बताती नहीं वो हमको क्या बेनिफिट मिलेगा?
कि एक स्ट्रक्चर फॉर्मेट हो जाएगा और डायग्नोसिस तक हम पहुंच जाएंगे।
किसकी डायग्नोसिस?
केस डायग्नोसिस कि उसकी इलनेस के बारे में हमें क्लियर कट इंडिकेशन मिलेगा।
ओके, और फिर हम क्या करेंगे डायग्नोसिस करने के बाद?
ट्रीटमेंट।
एग्जैक्टली इससे थोड़ा सा पहले नहीं हम तो कर देंगे, लेकिन पेशेंट को सडनली क्या बेनिफिट, दोनों ही एक दूसरे के कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चन हैं, जो आपने किया और जो मैंने किया।
पेशेंट की बीमारी को समझने के लिए ही हम हिस्ट्री और एमएससी लेते हैं और फिर पेशेंट का ट्रीटमेंट करते हैं। अब हम अगर पेशेंट के सिम्टम्स पूछ लें और फिर हम उसको बोलें कि जाइए सीटी स्कैन करके लाइए, ब्लड टेस्ट करके लाइए, तो उसमें भी तो पेशेंट का ही फायदा है ना, उसकी डायग्नोसिस समझना चाहिए।
एज अ साइकोलॉजिस्ट और मेंटल हेल्थ एक्सपर्ट, अगर पेशेंट हमारे पास आता है, हमने एमएससी किया, तो उसे क्या बेनिफिट मिलेगा आफ्टर एमएससी? भाई वो ये कहेगा ना मैम, जैसे करंट सिचुएशन में वो कहेगा आपने इतना टाइम लिया, अब हमें क्या बेनिफिट? तो इस बारे में अगर आप
अगर पेशेंट आपके पास अपना इलाज कराने के लिए आया है और आपने बहुत ज्यादा उसको टाइम दिया है, तो सबसे बड़ा बेनिफिट तो पेशेंट को यही होता है कि कोई उसको सुनने वाला नहीं था और यहाँ पे उसको इतनी अच्छी तरह से सुना गया, सारी प्रॉब्लम को समझा गया, और कोई इतना टाइम नहीं देता है ना, क्योंकि हमारा जो एक मेडिकल मॉडल है, मेडिकल मॉडल सिम्टम बेस्ड है और इन्वेस्टिगेशन बेस्ड है। बट साइकेट्रिक इलनेस में हम जब पेशेंट को इतना टाइम देते हैं, उसके साथ सारी चीजें पूछते हैं, तो उस प्रोसेस में पेशेंट को भी तो थोड़ी इंसाइट डेवलप होने लग जाती है, अगर पेशेंट साइकोटिक नहीं है।
लेकिन अगर हम प्रैक्टिस में देखें तो जो आते भी हैं पेशेंट, वो पहले से उनकी मेंटेलिटी होती है कि उन्हें केवल मेडिसिन या थेरेपेटिक ट्रीटमेंट चाहिए, और वो हमसे भी यही अपेक्षा रखते हैं, भले ही उनको कुछ नहीं है। हमें भी पता है, इवन साइकेट्रिस्ट को भी पता होता है कि इसको कुछ नहीं है, या कुछ आप प्लेसिबो से ही वो क्योर किया जा सकता है, लेकिन फिर भी देना होता है, क्योंकि जो क्लाइंट है या पेशेंट है उसकी डिमांड रहती है। तो मैं आपसे जानना चाह रहा था कि अगर कुछ टिप्स अगर आप दे पाएं कि उसको कैसे सेटिस्फाई करना है एट लास्ट, एट द टर्मिनेशन ऑफ आवर इंटरव्यू विद पेशेंट।
डॉक्टर अमित, पेशेंट के साथ जो हम रैपो बनाते हैं ना, जिसकी हम बात मैंने करी है, वो रैपो बेसिकली वो ट्रस्ट है जो पेशेंट का आपके ऊपर डेवलप होता है इन द प्रोसेस ऑफ इंटरव्यू, कि उसको लगता है कि ही इज एक्चुअली जेन्युइनली इंटरेस्टेड इन माय प्रॉब्लम एंड ही विल बी एबल टू हेल्प मी आउट। ठीक है, तो जब आप उससे हिस्ट्री और एमएससी लेते हैं, तो आप बेसिकली उनकी मदद करने के लिए ही ले रहे हैं ना। तो जो पेशेंट,
लेकिन मैम उसको ये, सॉरी मैं टोकना चाहूँ, उसको यही पता है कि ये मदद का मतलब है कि आप दवाई दे दीजिए हमें।
तो ये समझाना पड़ता है कि साइकेट्री और साइकोलॉजिकल प्रॉब्लम्स में ब्लड इन्वेस्टिगेशंस, सीटी स्कैन्स, एमआरआईज नहीं होते। हम इस इंफॉर्मेशन के द्वारा ही आपकी प्रॉब्लम को बहुत अच्छी तरह से समझ पाएंगे, डायग्नोसिस बना पाएंगे, और ये हिस्ट्री ही हमको हेल्प करेगी, या मेंटल स्टेटस एग्जामिनेशन ही हेल्प करेगा आपकी प्रॉब्लम को समझने के लिए। साइकेट्री में जो जानकारी लेने का जो तरीका है बीमारी को समझने का, वो हिस्ट्री डिपेंडेंट है, वो इन्वेस्टिगेशंस, ब्लड इन्वेस्टिगेशंस और अदर इन्वेस्टिगेशन डिपेंडेंट नहीं है।
ओके मैम, इसके अलावा जैसे हमें आवश्यकता होती है कि कुछ थेरेपी देना है हमें, तो वो नेक्स्ट सेशन से शुरू करेंगे या इसी के बाद, डायग्नोसिस के बाद ही हम कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं, या उसको फिर से?
पहले हम ये समझेंगे कि हमने डायग्नोसिस क्या बनाई है और इस डायग्नोसिस के लिए क्या अवेलेबल मैनेजमेंट है। अगर हमारी डायग्नोसिस स्किज़ोफ्रेनिया है, या हमारा पेशेंट मैनिक फेज में आया है, या हमारा पेशेंट बहुत सुसाइडल फेज में आया डिप्रेशन के, या इस समय बहुत ज़्यादा एक्यूट फेज में आया है, तो उसको उस समय सेटल डाउन करना पहली प्रायोरिटी है थ्रू मेडिकेशन जो साइकेट्रिस्ट देते हैं। जब पेशेंट मैनेजेबल हो जाता है, कोऑपरेटिव हो जाता है, और जब हम उसको साइको एजुकेट करते हैं उसकी बीमारी के बारे में और ट्रीटमेंट ऑप्शंस के बारे में, तब हम फिर मैनेजमेंट शुरू करते हैं, उसका मोटिवेशन एनहांस करके।
ओके, थैंक यू मैम।
Ma'am, how do we
all those who have not done psychiatry, who have not done MD in psychiatry, and are doing this PGDMH course, how this will help us to serve in the mental status, मतलब mental psychiatric patients में हमें ये किस तरह से हम help कर सकते हैं उन लोगों की? हम medicine, तो जैसे कि स्वाति मैम ने भी chat box में बोला कि हम prescribe नहीं कर सकते, तो हम किस behalf पे उनको help कर पाएंगे?
देखिए, जो साइकोलॉजिकल प्रॉब्लम्स होती हैं वो बहुत वैरायटी ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, ठीक है. दे कैन बी वेरी वेरी सिवियर साइकोटिक, मेजर साइकोटिक इलनेसेस, साइकेट्रिक इलनेसेस, जहाँ पे मेडिकेशन का रोल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है. बट अच्छी बात ये है कि जो साइकोलॉजिस्ट हैं या जो काउंसलर्स हैं, वो जो माइल्ड प्रॉब्लम्स है राइट फ्रॉम द बिगनिंग ऑफ इट, दे कैन आइडेंटिफाई और वो उसका साइकोलॉजिकल मैनेजमेंट शुरू कर सकते हैं. और मैनेजमेंट शुरू करेंगे तो आप उसको कभी बढ़ने देंगे ही नहीं अगर आप वहीं पे उसकी कोपिंग स्किल्स, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग स्किल्स को आप इन्हांस कर रहे हो, आप आइडेंटिफाई कर रहे हो कि क्या एनवायरनमेंट में प्रॉब्लम है, फैमिली में प्रॉब्लम है, जिसकी वजह से ये प्रॉब्लम बड़ी हो सकती है. वहाँ पे मेडिकेशन का कोई काम नहीं है. वहाँ पे आप अगर आइडेंटिफाई कर पाए और हेल्प कर पाए वो बहुत बड़ी बात होगी. पर आप उन सारी चीज़ों के लिए भी केस हिस्ट्री और एमएससी इम्पॉर्टेंट है. तभी मैं बार बार बोल रही हूँ, द इन्फॉर्मेशन जो आप लेते हो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है ये समझने के लिए कि प्रॉब्लम क्या है. बिकॉज कई बार जो पर्सन बोलता है अपनी चीफ कंप्लेंट्स में, और जब हम HOPI लेते हैं पेशेंट से और उसके इन्फॉर्मेंट से, तो इट कम्स आउट टू बी समथिंग एल्स ऑल्सो. ठीक है, दैट इज व्हाई द डिटेल प्रोसेस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड जनरली 2-3 सेशंस लगते हैं इंफॉर्मेशन लेने के लिए.
Also, I want to add, the number of psychiatrists are so less, they don't get enough time for the patients, and that's where we come in, where we really can, give so much time to the patients and actually listen out to them. Medical doctors, I feel they don't have so much time because the number of psychiatrists in India are so less compared to the mentally ill patients.
Okay, anything specific to the session today on case history and MSc? If you have any this thing, maybe we can take up more 5 more minutes for this. Okay, specific questions related to these two.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, as the discussion is again and again about the medicines that we can prescribe or not, I have read somewhere in the books that low dose antipsychotics can be given, and there are so many medicines which we give.
I'll just interrupt here. See, it is not that always medication has to be given for any psychological problem. Okay. Now, since this program you have taken admission, so in the information or the program guide, you must have read that what is the aim of this program, and I'm sure all of you must have read this. Okay. So the objective of this program is different. It is not about prescribing medicines. Okay, that is the domain of a different area. Those who have done the psychiatry as a specialization, they are going to prescribe medication only when it is required, as our expert Pooja was telling that. In case of severe disorders. Okay, so all those like all of you who are doing, and the object of this program is to make you aware about the different psychological problems, the mental health conditions that are available, and some of you, like those who are psychologists or those who are working as doctors in various systems of medicine here. As part of your practice, you may be encountering these type of cases where the psychological issues are there. So one is to understand those and accordingly go for the psychological management. So we are focusing here as part of this program not on medication, though medication has a role definitely in case of severe disorders. But as part of your practice, when you're dealing with the patients or with the different cases or clients, how you can go understand those things and go for the psychological management. That is the most important aspect here. Okay. So as I was telling, anything that you have, any questions related to the session today, you can ask. Otherwise, we can wind up here, and then the other 2 sessions that we have for tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we can carry on. And one more thing here, like many of you could not attend these sessions. Recording of these sessions will be made available And for the next 2-day session, I'll be planning for the Facebook link so that those of you who are like not able to attend through the Google Meet because it has a limit, that will be made possible. Okay, so you can attend through the link, that link also. Okay. Any
Excuse me, ma'am.
questions that you have, specific questions?
Excuse me, ma'am. We can only get that video from Facebook or any other place also.
No, on the IGNOU website it will be available.
Sure. All right, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, I have a question. Ma'am, if we fail to submit our internship file by 25th July, then later on we can submit?
That we'll discuss later on, okay? Because right now that is the...
Because my point is that because last date of examination form is 9th July, right? And if I submit my...
If you're planning to appear for the June term and examination, then you are sure that you are going to appear for that examination, you can fill up the exam form. Okay?
Because I have fill my examination form, all the theory subjects, but I have left this particular thing. That is why I'm asking. I have to resubmit my form again for this particular subject. Then only I can submit the file.
Yeah, if you have not filled up exam form for the practical, you will not be able to.
So I can do it and I can just figure out that I can submit by 25th or not, right?
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Ma'am, I just had one last question. I'm really sorry to interrupt. You have mentioned in the message that you have sent that we can also still do offline. So is that possible for later?
See, one thing, let me make it clear. I'm writing in the chat box, and once again I repeat that those of you who want to do practical activities in the offline mode in the hospital setting, you can always do that. Okay, and there will be supervisor. Go through your practical handbook first. So it is clearly given then that you have to take a supervisor from in the hospital setting and then carry out the activities given there in the handbook in the hospital setting. Okay. But right now, because of the COVID situation, this is being facilitated for you. So if you, and as I said, you have your admission validity. Okay. So within that, if you're not able to go to the hospital setting now, you can go later on and complete the activities. That's not the problem. But suppose
Okay, so even if I give my exams, I can do it later, right? I can still come to the hospital and do an
you can
internship?
give your theory exams now, you can give practical later, not a problem within that validity period. But for any, due to any reason, if you're not able to do and you want to go for this practical, online practical, then the guidelines are given in the guidelines uploaded on the IGNOU website. Okay. So these are all self-explanatory. You can go through those guidelines and do those activities that are given there and submit the report. And these classes that we are doing, these 3 days, this is to facilitate you to understand the concepts. Okay, understand the different topics that are there. So even if you are not going for the offline activities also, this will be helpful for you. Okay.
All right. Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I thank Pooja once again for taking out time and.
Good evening, ma'am. I have a query.
1 minute for being present here to take the sessions.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Yeah, tell me.
what about people who have completed their internship in offline